e5. Spaskey was a bit surprised, but he replied with f4. Fischer didn't expect this. Then he played e into f4. Knight f3, g5, supporting the pawn, h4. After this game in 1961, Fischer published in American Chess Quarterly, the best move is d6. Now what is played is h4. Instead of h4, let us go back and see. Bishop c4, g4, 0-0. Instead of castling, knight e5, queen h4 check, king f1, knight c6. Or after castling, g into f6, queen into f3, queen f6. The last move played is h4, g4, knight e5, knight f6. Instead of knight f6, let us go back and see. h5, bishop c4, rook h7, d4, d6, knight d3, f3, g into f3, e7, bishop e3, bishop into h4, bishop into h4 check, king d2, bishop g5, f4, bishop h6, knight c3. White has more than enough for the last pawn. This is vintage analysis. d4, d6, knight d3, knight into e4, bishop into f4, bishop g7, knight bishop 3. Here Fischer made a mistake. Better is c3. After this, white has no compensation for the pawn. Better is queen e7, queen e2, bishop f5. At least white keeps a grip on f4 for what it is worth. Last move played is knight c3, knight into c3, b into c3, c5, immediately nibbling at white's center. Kira suggests 0-0 first. This is what Kira suggests. Another grandmaster. Instead of c5, he suggests 0-0 is better. c5. Bishop e2. And queen e2 check. Let us go back and see. And queen e2 check. Bishop e6, e5. Bishop into c3 check. Let us go back. What is played is e2, c into d4, Spaskey castles, knight c3. After knight c6, bishop into g4, Fischer castles, bishop into c8, rook into c8, queen g4, f5. Instead of f5, king h8 is better. Winning a second pawn, but creating a king side weakness. Simply king h8 is better. Let us go back and see. f5 is played. Queen g3, d into c3, rook a e1. Black snatches the initiative after bishop into d6, rook f6, bishop e5, rook g6. So therefore, after rook a e1, king h8 is played. Also good is queen d7, bishop into d6, rook f e8, knight c5, queen f7. But let us go back, and the last move played is king h8, king h1. More accurate is bishop into d6, rook f6, or rook g8, knight e5. After rook f6, bishop e5, knight into e5, knight into e5. But what is played is king h1, rook g8, or on d5, knight c5 creates problems. Okay, let us go back. The last move played is rook g8, bishop into e6, bishop f8. That's a very good move. Bishop e5 check, knight into e5, queen into e5 check, rook g2. Rook g2 is a excellent move. Rook into f5. After rook into f5, queen into h4 check, king g1, queen g4. This is a mistake. It's the second or third mistake by Bobby Fischer. Drifting, not realizing the danger. I thought that black could whip an attack along the king knight file. But correct is queen g3, queen into g3, or if queen e2, bishop d6. But after queen into g3, rook into g3. Returning rook into knight, bishop c2. And white has a pawn down, has a tough ending to hold, as Spaskey pointed out after the postmortem analysis. Okay, let us go back. Last move played is queen g4, rook f2, bishop e7, rook e4. Fischer started feeling uncomfortable, but little did he imagine that his game would collapse in 4 short moves. He said, I should have taken a draw by repetition with queen d1 check, rook e1, queen g4, rook e4, queen d1 check, king h2, rook c6, queen b8 check, rook g8, queen e5 check, rook g7. But what is played is queen g5, queen d4, rook f8. Again a bad move, overlooking white's real threat. Fischer was worried about knight e5, bishop f8. Let us go back and see. Bishop f8, queen into a7, or knight e5, bishop c5, knight f7 check, king g8, knight into g5, bishop into d4, rook into d4, rook into g5. Last move played is rook f8, overlooking white's real threat. Fischer was worried about knight e5, not realizing that it would be met successfully with bishop c5. Let us go back and see. If bishop f8, e5, rook f8, instead of rook f8, bishop f8, queen into a7, or queen e5, bishop c5, knight f7 check, king g8, knight into g5, bishop into d4, rook into g4, rook into g5, or after queen into a7, bishop d6. Let us go back. The last move played is rook f8, rook d5. Rook d5 is a excellent move. Fischer said he was reckoned on knight e5, rook into f2, queen into f2, bishop c5, queen into c5, queen g2 mate. But what is played is rook e5, rook d8. Incredibly, black must lose a piece. While trying to figure out what was going on Spaskey's head, Fischer blundered and lost the game. Trying to scrum out, the queen has no shelter. On queen g6, instead of rook d8, on queen g6, rook into e7 wins, or queen g6, or queen h4, rook into f8 check, or queen d6. So let us go back. After rook d8, queen e4. Fischer said, I know I am losing a piece, but I just couldn't believe it. I had to play one more move to see it, whether it is really true. Queen h4, rook f4, and black resigns, or queen g3. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. Please subscribe so that you can see all the beautiful games of Bobby Fischer.